Okay, call this meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. I will begin by just reading in accordance with an act relative to extending certain state of emergency accommodations signed by Governor Baker on July 16, 2022, which extended the suspension of certain provisions of the open meeting law. This meeting of the North Reading School Committee is being conducted with some remote participation. In addition to the in-person attendance of members of the public and the school committee, this meeting is also concurrently being presented through a Google Meet and by a live broadcast by NORCAM to allow the public and any school committee members who cannot attend in person the opportunity to participate. I will say for the record, 4 of the school committee members are in person. Mrs. Boutwell cannot make it tonight, so there will just be 4 of us. Okay, start with public input, and I open up to the floor if there's any comments from the public. Mr. Barrett.
Hello, good evening, everybody. Do I grab a microphone?
Do you have a mic for NORCAM?
I can hear it. I mean, it's not out.
Is it okay right
It's
now?
not, okay.
I can hear it fine.
Okay.
Can you hear me on Zoom okay?
Neil, can you hear the comments?
Or Cindy?
Thumbs up? Thumbs up.
Okay.
I'm thumbs up.
Good.
All right, great. I'll try to talk loud. John Barrett, 2 Dogwood Lane. It's been a while since I've been here. I have a couple of things I wanted to cover tonight. One is there's an ongoing saga with the Board of Health, Department of Public Health in North Reading regarding having a public forum on the many documented dangers and inefficacies of the COVID shot and the many, many dangers and inefficacies of masks. The reason we need to hold this public forum, A, is because the data is overwhelming. B, because the CDC last week approved the kill shot for K through 12 as part of the regimen for children. Exactly 0.000% mortality for children under 20 of this disease. Masks have killed far more children than COVID will ever hope to. So as a town, I'm calling on the school board to engage with the Department of Public Health and the Board of Health, who has refused in a PDF memo to conduct a public discourse on the known unsafety, dangers, and inefficacy of the COVID shot and the known unsafety, dangers, and inefficacy of masks, which has been published widely in literature, which I have shared with all of you. These are Cleveland Clinic studies. These are American Heart Association studies. These are Cochrane Institute studies. There is no more debate about whether the COVID shot is safe and effective. It is not safe and is not effective. There is no more debate on whether or not masks are safe and effective. They are unsafe and they are ineffective, and they've killed far more children than COVID could ever hope to kill. I ask for your support to engage the Department of Public Health and the Board of Health, who have said categorically no, we will not hold this public discourse on the facts surrounding the kill shot and masks. I ask for your support to engage with Representative Jones and the Select Committee to ensure that this town never repeats the mistakes that were made during COVID. I will not give up. I will not give in. And the last thing I want to say, I think I have about a minute left, is I would like to say for the record that it is inappropriate for my name to be used at a staff welcome back meeting at the beginning of the year in any context. The least of which is to generate applause by the teachers who don't support my message. I think that is inappropriate behavior, and I would like to bring that for the record. So to summarize, I have sent the voluminous studies. There is no more debate on the safety and efficacy of this shot. There is no more debate on the safety and efficacy of masks. I've sent you all of the studies. I expect you to read them and understand them and act accordingly. It is time for this town to hold a serious accounting for the harm that we did to our children and to never do it again. Thank you.
Mr. Barrett. Any comments?
No.
Okay, thank you, sir. Moving on, student report. Anybody on the Zoom? No? Okay. Student report. We have Piper Kerwin here, class of 2024. Piper, would you like to give your student report?
Yes, so for notable academic matters, course selection is taking place right now. I think the deadline to submit courses for next year is February 17th. So the high school is looking at new courses and the repeating of some older courses. There's a PSAT and the SAT sign up is happening for June, I think May and August are all dates. And there's a college fair for anybody who might be interested in looking at colleges, and it's in Reading on March 16th. For notable fine art matters, the Masters is producing Beautiful Burnout, which is going to take place. It's a one-act, it's 45 minutes on March 4th. And if you look in the hallway, there are students' Bob Ross-inspired paintings that are on display. And then NRHS is also hosting Drama Fest, which is a theater competition on March 4th. And then also at the Memorial Library, there's an exhibit of a tiny art show, which is like 3x3 paintings that I think a bunch of students from NRHS did. For notable athletic matters, the registration for spring sports is open, and the track and field states is this week. For others, it's Kindness Week at NRHS, so we're focusing a lot on random acts of kindness. February break is next week. There's a glove drive. I believe it's for the Nubby and Proud project, which helps fight ableism and helps upper arm amputees, I believe. And then the eco team is running a thrift shop drive, which was very successful. And for my student work report, I brought in my Bob Ross painting, which is of Denali National Park.
That's awesome.
And so we basically watched a video of him painting, and then we got to pick our own reference photos and kind of got to mimic what he did. So I think it's super fun and educational.
And
So-
happy clouds.
Lots of
Yeah,
happy clouds.
lots of happy clouds.
Happy mountains, no happy trees.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very nice.
Thank you.
awesome.
So what made you guys think of Bob Ross?
I don't know. I think, yeah. I don't know. I think.
I mean, why not, right?
Yeah.
He's had a cultural moment the last 3 or 4 years, it feels
It's
like.
like 2 decades.
He's a cultural icon.
Yeah.
What was the drive that you spoke of before? You said there was I got so distracted by Bob Ross, but you said there was a thrift drive that was very successful.
Yeah, I think the
It's for recycling.
yeah. So the eco team
Okay.
here at school, which is a club, ran, I believe, a thrift shop like drive where people could kind of donate old clothes and they'd go to.
And then could people come and shop, or they?
I think so.
I
Yeah.
will.
So I think it was kind of like an exchange thing
Okay.
that happened.
Thank
I wasn't
you.
involved with it, but I'm sure it was my information. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you know, you mentioned the SATs and PSATs. I know that, I think during COVID, we started hosting the SATs here. Are we hosting them here as well now, or not?
I
Still?
don't think so anymore.
No.
Yeah.
Went away. Are there enough locations for students to get in? 'Cause I know that was one of the challenges. I think it was spacing, but where do most people go from North Reading then?
I know there's some St. John's hosts, and I think Reading High School also hosts, so there's some spots around here. I obviously don't know all of them, but I know there's some good places.
Yeah, a lot of places weren't doing it, so we said we
Yeah.
would do it.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Great job. Thank you very much. Okay. And as always, stay as long as you like. We won't be offended if you need to leave too, so. Okay. Thank you very much. So now we're on to new business, so turn it over to Dr. Daly. I don't think,
Mr. Johnson?
Mr. Johnson,
No,
not coming tonight, right?
I figured I could speak on his behalf.
Yeah.
In your packet, there is a letter requesting a trip for the boys varsity hockey team to stay overnight in Falmouth, Massachusetts, February 20th, so that we participate in the Jeff Hayes Memorial Tournament. Their first game would be Monday, February 21st, 6 p.m. They're going to also play on Tuesday, February 21st.
Is there a cost to this at all for the students or through the athletics or for the overnight stay?
I
Do they stay with their families or?
The families are, yep, they're staying, the team is traveling, staying with their families. So I believe that's where the cost would be.
So the families would
With the,
be
with the
paying,
total
okay.
fees, yeah, for the travel, for the hotel accommodations.
Any questions on the trip? So if we
Yeah,
don't have
motion.
any questions,
No questions about the hockey trip.
okay, you want to make a motion?
I will make a motion to approve the boys hockey overnight trip.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion from Noel and a second by Jeff. So I guess since we're all here, we'll say, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 4-0. Did you get that, Cindy?
Yes, perfect, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, moving on. We have a quick discussion about this policy subcommittee keeps, I don't know, comes up a lot more than it has in recent years. I don't know what's going on, but
Perfection takes time.
So I'll share,
lots of errors to clean up.
there is, I just thought it would be prudent to have a discussion. We received the nomination, so I thought it might make sense to have a discussion about the process, have some kind of a discussion about this award, trying if we can to not discuss specifics so as not to spoil this piece. And so essentially, I shared with you in your packet the recognition of community parent accomplishment of service. I noticed as I went through this process that there is, in this policy, there is a March 1st deadline. On the form, it had a May deadline. The way the policy reads to me is that it sounds like people can throughout the year submit a nomination, and then they would be reviewed by the committee, and then one or more awards would be made at one time. That's sort of the feeling that I get. The recommendation here is from the Hood School, and they have an upcoming presentation, and they would like the school committee to award that presentation on the night at their school. My opinion is that that makes a lot of sense to do a presentation at the school. I think that it makes sense. You know, I don't think we just want to, everyone that gets nominated gets an award. I think there needs to have a degree of discussion, deliberation, and thought. And so I don't see any limit. It's not like there's only 5 given a year, and so if we give them out one at a time and then you get a bunch, then you can't give them, right? So I think that this could work, but I just wanted to have that discussion, and then I guess some kind of a discussion to approve the award in the packet if we agree that that's.
All right, so why don't we start more broad, I guess. I mean, I've been here for 6 years now, and I don't know that we've ever given one of these.
I was going to say, how
Yeah.
often is there a nomination made?
Yeah, not that
Yeah.
often. The most recent, I believe, was when we gave something to Steve McManus and Vicki Labro for the CPAC service, and that was something that we wanted to recognize them, and this was the process we
Yeah.
used. And so it kind of worked out that it was the end of the year, and we met the deadline. Other than that, there's been a few here and there over the years.
So the policy clearly doesn't list a schedule of exactly how it's supposed to play out. Is there, I assume there's no procedure written down somewhere that backs up the policy that says all that, so we can do whatever we want.
I think so, yeah. It's more just, and we could update the policy if needed, but I at least want to try to confirm, because the nomination form has a different date than the policy, which is March 1st versus May 15th. The May 15th seems to indicate it would be an end-of-year type of award.
Yeah, I think the May 15th, excuse me for interrupting, the May 15th would be a good deadline for if you want it done this year, but not necessarily that it has to be done at the end of, if you, like you say, if you want to submit something in January. I see no reason why we can't consider it, especially if there's a specific event in time to.
One, and my only question is, I mean, again, I think we either publicize it a little bit more, kind of like the Charles Jones Award, and we try to do
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Or,
I've never heard of that.
yeah, or if we don't publicize it, if we just want to use it as needed, like, I actually don't know if we want it once a year, because it would be nice actually to do one when we go to little school, one when we go to the hood school, one in the batch, like, if the principal has somebody that we wanted to recognize.
Yeah.
So I actually don't know that we should only do it once a year, because if we do it in a meeting that nobody's at,
Yeah.
Is
You
there
know-
is it necessary to have
Yeah.
a deadline? Could it just be rolling admissions, you know, or rolling nominations, I should say?
that's what I would think, and then, yeah. And we
Because
could,
then it makes it seem like this is the limit. This is the one you get this year or whatnot.
yeah.
Um,
I think it would be nice to be able to publicize it to the principals of the schools. If there's somebody they want to recognize or they think, you know, when we do a school presentation, maybe we can start with an award. And then, you know, and then again, at end of the year, like with McManus, you know, McManus's, when they were leaving, they had, you know, volunteered their time for many years running CPAC. You know, I think, yeah, I'd be open to it whenever, and maybe working with some of the people in the district to see who they think should be. How would they take the case?
And is the nomination process similar to the Charles Jones, you know, submit a letter?
Yeah, the packet was in the.
Oh, it is it?
You can see that. I wonder whether the process is something like it needs to be submitted a certain amount of time prior to the meeting you hope
Yeah.
it's awarded, or something like
Correct.
that. Because I do think that there needs to be a process where you can deliberate
Yeah.
on the validity of your
Correct.
award.
It
And
is
I
kind of
think-
awkward, the idea of a public deliberation, though, which is something
It
we kind
is.
of have to do. And if we're
And I don't know
gonna
how
go-
you would do it otherwise, unless
Yeah.
we had a subcommittee, you know, which technically.
So it has to be a
also
public
would be-
deliberation?
Well, I don't know how else we would choose, unless, I guess the other alternative would be like the chair would just decide.
Yeah, you can have a subcommittee or.
Even a subcommittee would
Or,
have to.
and
would technically
again,
do it.
excuse my lack of knowledge, but like to do it in an executive session, is that something or not?
It's not something that I think is
Not
one
appropriate,
of the
okay.
purposes.
Right, I couldn't find one of the,
Yeah.
yeah. To me, that makes sense because of the surprise element,
Right.
but I don't think legally, yeah, that was something I definitely found out, so.
We could make the vote as part of the presentation.
And you can take the recommendation of the chair or the vice chair or something
Yeah.
like that. Or, yeah. Something like that makes sense. to me.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
that-
I
that
think most
adds
of these are gonna be pretty obvious.
That adds a certain
Right.
specialness to it, too. It's like, you know, yes, we all strongly agree and vote for this award.
Yeah.
So my suggestion, I think, would be on the process, is possibly at the next policy subcommittee,
Right.
just maybe, you know, modify it to what we've been talking about, and
Okay.
That's fine.
we could do something like that, we could vote on that, and then,
Just keeping it open.
Yes.
As open as possible, but still have a policy.
yes.
And I think we could advertise it too. I think that's not a bad idea.
Yeah, we can put that there, and I think if nothing else, just identifying to the principals in advance of their meeting when we're gonna have,
Mhm.
you know, them come in, say, is there anybody that you would like to identify that, you know, to consider for this? Be nice, I mean, because a lot of times they are very, you know, kind about, you know, the people running the PAs and the parent associations and various, you know, volunteers that help them out, and, you know, be nice. And then in terms of the specific.
Can I- One
Yeah, go
last
ahead.
question.
Yeah, go
Do we agree that we can waive the March 1st for this, so like if the school hasn't submitted something by March 1st this year, we can honor that
Yeah.
and go by the,
Like, side of that.
yeah. And then we'll change that policy.
Yeah,
Yep.
I'd be fine with that.
Sorry.
And then,
Specific?
yeah, and then, and as for the specific, you know, award, you know, for the person, for the, you know, the parent volunteer or the community member volunteer at the hood, do we want to have a motion now, or do we want to have a motion at the, I mean, I don't mind, I kind of like Rich's suggestion, I mean,
I
if
do
we
too.
can,
I like that.
Yeah.
Rich likes this suggestion.
Well, I just think I like that idea of, because then you can have it on the agenda as a, I don't know how you make sure that the person's there without sort of giving the game away, but maybe the principal just says, I want to recognize you.
Well, school, you could put on school committee award of appreciation.
Yeah.
Just put that as a topic,
As a,
not say
as
with
a,
it.
as a topic, right. And the principal can just say to the person, I want to acknowledge you, that, you know, this is our night. And,
Yeah, and I think, again, if we know we're not going to do it, we would.
Yeah.
Someone.
Right. And the principal will submit it and
Right.
we'll give them, yeah, exactly.
And I think that the.
And that can be the chair's
Yeah, and I don't
discussion
think
with
it's
the
a total
principal.
surprise, but it's more of a, we don't want to steal their thunder. at this meeting.
Yeah.
to discuss. So I like that procedure. I think that makes a lot of
Yeah,
sense.
I mean, chair, or, I mean, again, if we wanted to give a role to the vice chair too, vice chair could be in charge of
As you wish.
that as well, I mean, if you prefer, I don't know, I mean, whichever, I don't think it matters. I mean, I'm probably more, Dr. Daly talks to me more
Regular.
about the agenda in advance, and so then we could do that. But yeah, I mean, we just put it on and we do the vote there, and again, as part of that, we talk about the person, and like, so for example, in this one, Dr. McKay could give a presentation on that, and then we could officially vote and then hand the certificate out.
Sounds good.
Okay. Okay, so so we're not gonna vote on this tonight then? We'll wait for next week, and in terms of the policy, we will wait to see a modification in our upcoming meeting. Okay, awesome. Any further discussion on that? Okay, no vote, Cindy. Moving on. School committee goals update. So we have, Dr. Daly put in our packet our tasks that we assigned to ourselves. I think it might make sense just to sort of go through.
Enthusiastically waving through the door.
Oh, was that Abby? So it makes sense to maybe go through and just sort of have an informal update on where we're at for all of the various tasks. So if we start under leadership and governance, action number 1.1 with Rich and Noel. An update.
Rich and Noel have not talked about this yet.
Shouldn't know well, need to do that.
Okay. Let's see. Professional, and again, just as a reminder, we're trying to get this done by end of April. Is that what we said?
Are we making that move this year, or are we gonna try to shoot for that?
Let's try.
Or maybe we could, maybe
Or
we.
plan for it,
And
but
maybe-
not
Well, in
have
case
it-
I'm out.
Well, that's it. I think, so just backing up a little bit, if I may, I do think it makes sense to shift that cycles to end at the last meeting
Before the election.
before the election.
I agree.
And maybe this year there's some overlap, right? Maybe we
Yep.
set some new goals in May, even if we haven't quite finished with our work, this year
Yep.
on these goals. And then-
So in other words, if you're embarrassed by not doing that much, you tank the election and work out.
Yeah,
There you go.
it's gonna be hard for me to tank the election, it sounds like.
I made bigger messes in my life, so. Just kidding. Okay, so no update there, but again, also remember, we're still in mid-February, so we still have a couple of months. And most of these, I think it's just, we just have to sit down and do it. And frankly, I mean, Mr. Connolly's not here, but on the ones that we've accomplished with myself and Rich, and myself and Jeff, it's really because Mr. Connolly has accomplished it for us, as we'll see, so.
Yep.
Okay, so 1.2, yep.
In fact,
Dylan? Yes.
I respectfully think they should stay year-long goals.
Year-long,
And
yeah.
that- and that we could have on the agenda to revisit it before or after an election, but I don't know whether the goals are of the committee, I know we've made them kind of individual, but.
They are the committee, but either way, we have to do it via, even if the committee doesn't turn over, though, we need a starting and end point. I think part of this, some of these things are things that would be in the budget. And so having them done by the, end of April, early May is probably the right timeline anyways, as opposed to doing it over the summer. I think that's because the concern is like, if we're getting into, end of August or whatever, we're not here a lot of times in the summer, and so I think when we had talked before, it wasn't only the election, I think part of it was also the budget process and everything else, kind of aligning with some of those.
And I don't think it means we can't do the goal setting during our summer meeting also. It doesn't have to take a year, because, I mean, frankly, the summer is going to be a bit of a wash
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, but if we wrap them up by May, and then, in the summer we talk about what the goal is for the next year, I think that would be fine. Just to kind of get, I'm sure the less you see of us in the summer, the better. I would think, but. Okay, and then, so the second one, school committee review, school committee policies related to school safety plan, and the role of the school resource officer, Diana and Jeff. Have you guys had any conversations about this?
I have read on my own, but I have not talked to anyone about it.
Okay. That is something that, Diana and I had some conversations with select board members, and ours sort of ended with possibly holding a joint executive session. And so
It certainly would be appropriate for it.
my suggestion would be, if we're gonna do anything, maybe that could be something that could be scheduled in the near future.
Yeah.
Maybe have.
I'll shoot it out to Diana and.
Yeah,
Yep.
talk about that and see,
That's
because
fine.
that's kind of where we left off before, and so.
I will just say that we still have the one resource officer, but we have increased the visibility of the officers in the
Yep.
schools, which has been very well received. We just went through another round of our school safety team meeting to discuss the interactions with students, staff, and administration has been very positive. So we extended our thanks to the police for
Yep.
Any commonality to the responses you're getting, like, or is it just more like thanks?
From both sides, it's the increased awareness and visibility.
Right.
And so hearing from the police side, just that they, I think like for everyone, it's something new, so it's a change.
Sure.
But once they got used to it, they really have appreciated getting to know the buildings better, getting to know the players better. So they know if there ever is an emergency, they now are much more comfortable coming in. I think they would come here more when an alarm would go off on the weekend. They weren't seeing the people or the places. To see an active space and know, they're getting a sense of where kids are during different times of day and passing times and crowds.
Yeah, no, I think it's great.
Yeah, it's
And
just more awareness.
as a parent, my feedback from my kids has been really positive.
Yeah.
They always report back if they see Officer Lucci or anybody else, and it's positive because they have said, it seems like, like I forget which child it was, but one of the officers was asking where's your classroom from here? It seemed to her just like curiosity, but it was nice.
That's great.
Yeah.
I had a first grade teacher today tell me that she had a student, we did our Alice exercise, they did their debrief. She had all these ideas, all these questions, all these suggestions, which was great. And she said the student went out in the hall to get her backpack, and she was taking a minute to get back, and she's like, what, she goes to the bathroom, she stepped out in the hall, she's talking to the police officer and giving the police officer some ideas. And
That's great.
It's great. So that's
perfect.
a first grader sharing. It's just a great example of that relationship being built and that trust.
Perfect.
Yeah, the trust is nice.
I have to say, this was a really great response to the Uvalde shooting, because it's just like the perfect action to take to address what may have been I don't know the details really, but may have been a shortcoming in that situation. I think it's a great. Okay.
So, moving on to financial and asset management, Jeff and we were tasked with looking at free full-day kindergarten and beginning exploration of universal free or universal pre-K. Jeff, you want to give an update? We did have a meeting with Michael and Patrick.
Yes, we did. I'll be darned if I can remember enough detail
So-
to give an update.
Well, I'll just say on the full-day kindergarten, I think
Yeah.
we've made steps the last few years to reduce the cost. I think we might have a budget update on if we're going to have that, or I might give that later on, but
But there are a couple
it's going to be a
options.
really horrible year for budget,
Yeah.
just to be honest with you. Rich and I can probably attest to that, where we are far away from where we need to be, and it's going to be a really bad year. But I think what we had talked about was sort of like a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year
Right.
step down. Mr. Connolly did an excellent job of showing with money that's in the revolving account, how we could sort of lessen that at least so it's not a financial cliff in any 1 year, and sort of showed how we could reduce or, and eliminate it eventually. I think the question is, I think everybody would want to do it immediately, and the question is, can we do it in 1 year, or is it 2 years, or is it 3 years? And so that's kind of the reality of where we're at.
It's a money game.
I could say that the budget that we will share would not have a full elimination early. Our plan
Correct.
was to try to get it by 2025. We're still on that pace, but
Yes.
So option 2 or option 2, I think.
Yeah, option 2 or 3, and then we can step down to 2 or 3 years. And then we started some discussions on universal free or even just overall pre-K. it was mostly me asking questions because I'm ignorant about a lot of how it works right now. And, you know, Mr. Connolly and Dr. Daly explaining sort of, you know, even when we run the program, when, you know, when students are on IEPs, there has to be a certain ratio of students on IEPs with students that aren't on IEPs, talking about the spatial issues. I think I had asked Mr. Connolly for some feedback on sort of how many people have applied and were not offered opportunities in the last couple of years, and he did share that with me afterwards. So I think we need to have another meeting on that, but I think we have a pretty solid plan on the kindergarten part. I think the pre-K is going to be the more difficult one, and you know, and even just trying to figure out what the plan is. Is the plan to offer it to as many people as want it, or is the plan just to expand it a little bit more, or what? The other thing that I brought up in this meeting was when we were talking about capital projects, we had talked about if we need a new building in the future, or even like we had talked about eliminating some of the modulars and whether we have to replace them, whether we need to do an extension onto a building. I think this discussion dovetails with that discussion because, you know, these classrooms need to have separate bathrooms. And so I think that's something that for long-term planning, this committee should be thinking about, so that if we are going to in the future do a building project, knowing that we might want to build a few more rooms with bathrooms in them, so that we could potentially, even if we wanted to, at least we have that option available. So, but I think that's the goal, is maybe we get a blueprint of like what decisions would have to be made. I don't think anything will happen in the next year or two, but just thinking ahead. Dr. Dale?
Yeah, just to restate that, you know, we are approved at the state level for a certain number of students at a certain program, and there's ratios, as you mentioned. So one thing would be to look at the fees charged for the existing program, which we have space for and approval from the state. Another layer would be if we were to somehow expand that program. That's a very different piece, as you said. We are, in addition to what we're doing on our side, we are looking at any opportunities for grants or anything to help support or accelerate that. So through the Student Opportunity Act, some of what was suggested was if you, they had a list of, I forget the word that they used, but there were 7 to 10, let's say, areas of focus. Now that they have come out with that funding, they have 3 or 4. And the pre-K and the kindergarten was not one of them. So I did apply for that, and I did use one of the areas of focus, which was about diversification of staff, and I said diversification of staff for early childhood. So I'm trying to see if we get funding to help support diversification. It could be used to also do that. So we'll see what comes of that.
Can I ask, the state is approved, I guess, what is your word, of what we currently do? Is that based on space? Is that one of the limiting factors? I mean, is it in the space that you have, you're approved to do X?
Right.
With the staff that you have?
Yeah, and it's based on the number of students that we typically have with disabilities that we then need to have. So basically, we have to run a program for students with disabilities.
Okay.
We have to have a certain number of typical peers for those, so based on those numbers, they come up with a ratio, and that's the space that we have and the staffing, and it's supported by the tuition-based pre-K, helps pay for the entire program.
So we've had some initial discussions. I think I think the kindergarten piece will be a broader part of budget discussions. The pre-K, I think that's something that could probably be in the goals for a few years to kind of, I think just understanding what the challenges are and how it's structured, and I think it's a good thing for us to do. Solar, Jeff, have you
I
done
don't
anything
have
on
another
this?
update on that, sorry.
Okay. Rich and Diana,
No.
positions, the ESSER funds?
No update on that. I kind of have a question about how that's going to flow with the budget subcommittee and the development of budgets, but no, we have not spoken about that.
I mean, I think at the end of the day for ESSER funds, we have them budgeted through next year, is it?
So it's really a strategy for next year that we need to start.
With the next budget season.
Yeah. I mean, I think overall, just, maybe we'll talk about budget later on, I'm sure, but it's, a friend of mine from work, I know that they're doing an override in their town because the budget's been so bad, and a big piece of it was ESSER funds going out. and they don't want to lose those positions, and the budget doesn't have it in there, and so amongst other reasons, that was, one of the catalysts for an override vote in their town. And I think we're going to see it in more towns, and it's something that I think we need to be versed on. So, okay, the school committee will review the impact of fees on North Reading families. Rich and I did have this meeting with Dr. Daly and Mr. Connolly, and again, Mr. Connolly did a great job pulling together data to try to figure out, really where is the impact. What we don't have yet is, well, sorry, I should let you update. I've been talking too much. Rich, why don't you update?
So our first question was to look at how many families are paying what are the highest total fees between the athletics fees, the student activity fees, the fine arts fees, and the bus fee. What families are paying like the max of all those fees, and does it feel like we need to have an overall cap, a universal cap to take some of the burden off those families who are just paying a lot in every year? And I think there's certainly were some families who sort of reach a threshold, and it depends on how you want to define the threshold, but there are some families paying well over $2,000 a year in fees.
Really?
Yes. I think the highest was $22.25 or something.
Yeah.
$2,225 in fees.
And so,
Multiple students.
Yeah.
oh yes, so these are obviously, but certainly families with bigger families are going to pay more fees. So we struggled. We had a long discussion about what the right approach there, and there are some logistic problems or some practical problems of allocating. If you put in a cap, how do you allocate the fees that are collected across? Because these all go into revolving accounts, so they're very specifically the legal requirements, the way they're set up, so you have to be careful there. We didn't reach any final conclusions, except that it feels like we want to do something there. Unfortunately, it doesn't really address fees in any real sense.
I think, so if I can jump in, I think the two or three things I think we sort of came up with. One big challenge right now is the spreadsheet that Michael had made did not include spring fees yet. So it's hard to figure out exactly what the total amounts were going to be because all the spring fees were not in there yet. So some of the highest paying ones might have already capped out on some of them, but we didn't know yet. So we sort of wanted to pause on the dollar amounts until that point. I think we were in agreement that we should propose a universal cap, and the question is what a dollar amount that would be. And so based on the data we had at that point in time, like if we had set it at $1,800 or something like that for the year, the cumulative effect for the budget would be around $5,000. So but again, I mean, and the other concern I think that I had was, some parents are already paying this amount, but I'm more concerned with people that aren't paying it. Maybe they would be able to if they could afford it. So I think we were in agreement on trying to do proposing a universal fee or universal cap on all fees. We just had to figure out what that dollar amount would be. And then the other the other thing that came up in that discussion was that when we were looking at the individual fees, the bus fee is probably needs to be increased. That's another thing that I think we need to undertake for next year potentially, because the goal is that the bus fee, usually about half of it is supported by the fees. And since the cost of the fees have gone up, the bus fee is not covering the cost right now. And we're going to have another fee increase for next year. And so in a really tough budget year, we have to be careful about how much we're subsidizing from our general budget. Mm-hmm. So that was just another thing where we're looking at the fees, but one thing that I thought came out was that the bus fee is it hasn't been adjusted in a number of years. And I think that is, the cost of everything has gone up so much that probably needs to be adjusted. So we came out from talking about limiting fees to possibly proposing an increased fee for the bus. But
any discussion on, sort of the hidden element of what people aren't of any numerics on who isn't able to participate? Not named, but just in terms of numbers of like a sense of what we're missing.
Well, we talked about like how students could, if they wanted to play, if they wanted to participate. We talked about, you know, how even though lunches are free now, the application can waive other fees, and we talked about some of that. And I don't think we know of students that are saying, I wanted to play, but I couldn't play. But it's more of like,
It's a
how do
tough
you
nut to
capture
crack.
that data?
I just don't know.
Yeah, Dr. Dale?
Yeah, I would say we did discuss that possibly that survey kind of a question to ask. I think you could look at the data. If we say, let's just say the cap is 1,800, I think that was the number you used, you could see who's close to that, you know, and assume that if people are under that cap, the question of whether they would need it, I don't know if I'm making sense, but I think if they're not able to pay the 1,800 now, let's say, I don't know whether they would then all of a sudden, if we capped it at 1,800, be able to do it.
Mhm.
Right, makes sense. So I think you could get some data about who's close. It's interestingly, you know, part of what we discussed was how much we've heard. We've heard from a few families. I actually did get an email today that suggested somewhat of a cap. So I mean, that idea is something that families have discussed. And,
Nope.
and I do think it's worth certainly exploring for the future.
Yeah.
I wonder if the athletic department coaches are hearing any of that, maybe it's not filtering out up. I wonder if it'd be worth sort of pushing that question down.
I will. I would say this, I would certainly hear it, I think, if I was hearing it was coming that way.
If you had a coach who had a player, is like,
Especially if they were really good.
well,
Right? No,
but
I'm just
almost,
kidding.
but almost
But
any
I think
team is
anyway,
gonna
I think
be like,
they
I
will
want more.
share.
Yeah, we want more.
Yeah.
And we do have other things to help with scholarships and other pieces as well. I think this is really for folks that can quote unquote afford it, but it's still a lot,
Yeah.
especially
No,
when
it's
we've
still a lot.
introduced multiple tiers now within the groups, and it's, you may have, if your child's doing many different things,
It feels like you're just doing a lot.
yeah.
Now, you can talk about the value of it compared to outside activities, but I mean,
Right.
Well, and we talked, the other two things, I would say, we talked about what the process would be, because we also have to be cognizant that, like, this could be a lot of work to try to do. So I think what we'd probably do is just sort of educate that there is this universal fee, and if you're reaching it, you have to sort of raise your hand and say that, as opposed to putting on Michael and his team to like check every single one that comes in. I think it's going to be, so again, maybe you feel you can afford it and you pay $2,000 and you know, to pay $200 more. But again, I think part of it might be put on just saying this is universal fee. If you think you've reached this, you know,
Yeah.
raise your hand, or
Yeah, and there
fill
may
out this
be
like
people
one
that
page thing that says the
don't
fees
do
you
that.
paid.
No, I don't have a problem having it be more proactive.
Yeah.
The worry I have in my head, and I don't know how to get at it, is
Yeah.
I'm not worried about the last $200, I'm worried about the first $200.
Yep. Well,
And we can advertise it and say, oh, there are scholarships and all of that, but it's, how do you crack that nut? And I don't have a good answer.
yeah. And then the only other thing that I would just say is, because I know we put in some waivers for sports, trying to make sure that we have enough athletes on that. Again, I'm not suggesting that they're related. I think we've had smaller numbers of students in high school as well. But I do want to make sure when we see things like this, if we see lower numbers in certain things, I just want to make sure that it has nothing to do with this. And so even if it's $5,000 or $6,000 that we allocate to try to subsidize the budget in this, I think it's a good message that we're looking at this. And so I strongly encourage that we do, as part of the budget this year, we do put a universal cap on fees and, see what happens. And we can play with it. And again, we can set it a little bit high to begin with and then see the impact and then, adjust it in the future. But we had that discussion and it was a good discussion, and I think there'll be something that comes from that.
And I'll just share that I do pass along to families that inquire that it's one of your goals.
Yep.
Which I think is, and that they're being.
one other thing that just occurred to me, I know that in most cases with clubs and maybe with the other activities as well, there's usually organizational meetings, or if you're interested, come to this. That seems like an opportunity for to share the information that, you're gonna be in the club, there's an activity fee, but if you need, you know, there are opportunities for relief if you need it. I don't know if that happens now, but it feels like that's a way to get some of the message out right to the people as they're expressing interest
Right.
in doing those activities.
It's a part of it. I think we can always make sure that it's,
I think that's the most important, because it seems like it's always brought up in public discussion. Like, what about the people that can't afford the user fee or whatnot? And it's as Michael says, it's like, I do everything I can to,
Yeah.
I put it up on the website, but if
Absolutely.
it's whether it's just
And you still see things like that in the.
an insert in every bit of literature that goes out, and I mean, so many things now are virtual, but you know, just like it's like almost like everything. It's a form that is included in every. It's like a QR code where you can go right to that, and I'm sure Michael probably already has something like that set up. But just to make it very easy and very clear.
I've seen it in highlight,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you have like bolded
That's
highlight.
great.
Yeah.
But people still say, in response to that email, it's not clear enough. And it's
Right.
like, so I agree, but we can always do better to
Yeah.
make it more clear. I think maybe, visuals, big buttons, like, maybe
Yeah.
it's one place to go.
And again, I mean, the point of this is just kind of an update, and, the goal is that we're all doing some of these things to bring it
Definitely a
before
hot
the committee,
topic,
so,
though.
yeah.
You know, I mean, I remember even last year when Jeff and I were
Yep.
doing our events, our campaign events.
Well, and
That would come up a lot.
and again, I mean, I think it's important that
That issue.
it's important that people know that we're discussing it first and foremost, and that
Yes.
we actually do something on it, and especially if we're going to have to adjust certain fees, because again, buses are gas goes up, the cost of the
Oh, sure.
contract goes up. So I think when that's happening, it's a time more than any to really be looking at the impact overall, and yeah. Okay, moving on, just on the educational ones. School committee will participate in a working group to implement the steps of NRPS 2025 related to equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. Rich and Jeff, I know you've been going to some of those.
Yeah,
The meetings,
and that's
so.
really what that is, and being in those meetings and participating and supporting them. Like, Jeff,
I have not been there yet, so
Yeah.
just for disclosure.
Next meeting's on the 28th of February.
I think Jeff has a hair appointment. but We'll see.
Let's see that.
I'm glad you like my hair.
I'll just,
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
on that,
Yes.
we have a meeting on February 28th. We have also our parent university, family university on March 25th. That'll be one of the topics too.
Okay. Yes,
Is there a role for us at the parent university in any sense, or what?
family unit.
We can incorporate whatever you like. The idea is we're finalizing the program, but there's going to be a keynote presentation and then 2 breakout sessions, each having maybe 4 choices. We're thinking the North Reading Police Department and Substance Abuse Coalition would do 1 or 2. The keynote may do her own breakout, a DEI, one, and then maybe another. So I mean, in terms of, do you have any specific ideas?
Well, I was thinking back to when we've done this in the past, and we sort of had, stations set up on Main Street here. Remember, we were there for when we were talking about start times. I don't know if that's not, so that's more of a presence, just being a presence in
Yeah.
the event, but.
Yeah, we have thought about putting, that was the second year, and we sort of had tables, like information tables,
Yeah.
so we can do them. We're gonna have a few of those. But yeah, I had a request today about, student presentation, the robotics student might want to present. And we hadn't thought of that, it was kind of a cool idea, and so, yeah, so if you have a specific idea, we can share that and try to think about what that would look like.
Yes, I see the robotics team got into some competition, they're raising funds for that.
Right, I saw that.
I saw that.
The 3rd grade?
Yeah, for the NRHS, yeah.
Yeah, we have about 17 sign-ups so far, so I'm hoping to get a lot more.
Okay.
So we'll get
For the
that.
family university?
Yeah,
Okay.
so we'll get more information, I think.
Yep. Oh, you have to sign up? I didn't catch that.
Yeah, it's okay. It was a preliminary kind of.
I put it on there, but I had to look. I had
It was a
something else
safety day.
planned.
I think we'll get a lot
Yeah.
more when I have a specific group.
Yeah.
But, there is some
Okay.
interest.
And then, Noel, if you want to update, if you've done anything on the encouraging the district-wide exploration of UDL and the MTSS.
Yep, I have not, touched base with Diana on this, but I obviously need to start the ball rolling, so hopefully can have an update for you soon.
Okay. Moving on.
We'll be talking about that at Family University also. That's a place to check in, but we can set up something with us as
Okay,
well.
yeah, I would,
So,
I probably would like before then to,
yeah. Maybe
Thank
we can set up something virtually with,
and we are, here, we would like at some point one of our, to have somebody come to one of our meetings and present like success story type of thing.
Mhm.
Okay, I would like to see that personally. So yeah, that's interesting. I'll look at that.
I'm gonna say that you're probably gonna see it a little bit in all the school presentations.
Okay.
So I think some of these
Kind of covered.
goals are in NRPS 2025, they're in the school committee
Yeah.
goals, and they're in your goals, and they're in the school improvement plan. So I think some of these goals, you're gonna get more data and evidence through those presentations that are coming.
Is there any, and again, forgive this question if it's silly, but when schools are preparing their presentation, is there any input that you give that saying, we'd like to see you present on X, Y, Z? Like,
Yeah.
we'd like to, okay.
So I don't know that it's specifically going to get at it, but we can also ask, those are good questions. You could ask every school also.
Right, exactly, just make sure
can
that's
you
a
talk a
point.
little bit about this or that, and I can tell them that that's coming, so. I mean, I will also say that in some ways, just having, the fact that you have these as goals, and that your goal is to support and encourage, I'm able to say that
Mhm.
when I'm working with principals, working with teachers, working
Right.
with, because we get, there's always questions about where's this coming from, right? And
Yeah.
it's like, this is something that the school committee supports, that the district supports, that the school supports. Because it's hard to always add one more thing to a teacher's busy
Right,
plate.
but I think this is
but I
super
think-
important.
Exactly. So in some ways that's happening, but we can certainly, UDL is not or MTSS, very clearly not a special education piece. But if you know that Cynthia Conan is in charge of not just special education, but also teaching all students, she's kind of the lead on this. So I think when she presents as well, that's something that she can touch on. So we'll make sure that communities that. But if you'd like to have a small meeting with the administration, I can arrange that. as well.
Yeah, no, I'm interested in learning more, so, yeah, thank you.
I think that'd be good, just to be proactive. I mean, you just had setting a meeting with Dr. Daly and seeing what's there, and then.
Yeah, no, definitely,
Yeah.
yes,
Perfect.
thank you.
And then, let's see, school committee will, also Noel again, school committee will review the policies and processes to continue, provide opportunities for hybrid public meetings and explore ways to continue. Have you spoken at all about this with anybody? I mean, personally, I think actually this is working pretty well with the.
Yeah,
model.
I'm feeling like if it ain't broke, don't fix it sort of thing.
Yeah.
But under this, is this also, would under this fall, at some point we were talking in the spring about reorganizing, like when the public comment would be. Does that fall under here? And like, cause we have the public comment initially, and I mean, I don't know.
It could.
Yeah.
I mean, it could. I think, to me, I think the two big things are, number one, the order that I read every time is going to expire soon.
Right.
And so, just a reminder that before these orders, before COVID, the chair can authorize the meeting being broadcast however they want. And so, NORCAM or a Google Meet, the way I read the open meeting law is we don't need any authorization to do that. We can broadcast it out. What we can't do is have a member not be here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can allow the public to participate if we want to. The issue is like if Diana wanted to, Zoom in or, join the Google Meet from abroad, we can only do that if we get select board approval.
Mhm.
The select board has to approve that. And so that is something I think is maybe worth a conversation.
Yeah.
But that's
to
not
see.
blanket approval though, that's for that incident.
It's,
If I read
They
it
have
right.
to change the bylaw.
they have to change
Yeah,
the
change
laws
the
to
law.
allow it, and then we can decide if we want to do it or not.
Correct.
But we would still have to have, the chair would have to be in person, so if I can't make it, Rich would have to be chair. There has to be a majority in person. And so there was, it wouldn't be, we wouldn't be able to do a completely remote meeting.
Right.
Unless the laws change. If the laws end up changing as a result of COVID and then they're allowed to be virtual, then that would be different. But if we go back to the old laws, I still think we should at least get that approval. Because if we're doing a Google Meet and one of us happens to be traveling but could still participate, I personally would rather have everybody's voice at the meeting rather than just the 4 that could
Right.
be there in person.
Yeah, and for like, those of us with like, say, young kids, or like, there was a meeting a few meetings ago, I just couldn't leave home because I had 6 children, but I'm perfectly able to attend. I would hate to miss that meeting
Yeah.
for that reason.
Well, and also sickness, like if somebody's sick, like we don't want
Right,
to come
yeah.
in and be like coughing all
That's
over
true.
each other to, you know, when we can do that, but at the same time, we'd want everybody participating
yeah.
in this.
Okay. All right, yep.
Do we know when the order, I'm sorry.
Yeah, when does it expire?
I forget where, it was extended to, I don't remember what it was extended
I
to.
feel like things keep getting.
Yeah.
I thought it was through maybe April.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I could double check that. What I was going to say is I haven't heard any updates, so I can look into that a little bit as well. I'm hopeful, I agree, I'm hopeful that that's an outcome that
Yeah.
the committees can do that, and then maybe it's a discussion with select board. I would say, I would agree that when we came up with this goal, we were having a lot more difficulty. I think we've had success with the OWL, a few troubleshooting issues, but it's been fairly successful. We've had very little participation from home, as
Yeah.
usually tonight, it's usually us or some of the people that are typically involved in a meeting able to take advantage. So I think I would have no problem continuing to do that, and I think it's always giving an opportunity for public input from home if needed.
Yeah.
So I think technologically, I think we probably
Yeah.
cracked that nut.
I think that's
And I think this opportunity for people, if needed, we haven't had a lot of hot button issues, and I think if we did,
Yeah.
you might see more people trying to chime in.
For sure.
I
I
think
think
this
the
runs
budget's
out
gonna be
sooner
the
than you
issue.
think, by the way.
What was that?
I think this runs out sooner than you think. I think this is March 31st.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I thought it was, yeah, it's definitely in the next few months.
And if I recall, the legislature looked at it maybe the last session before the order was renewed and punted.
They did.
And then, so the governor extended the order. And so who knows, and now we have a new governor, and so who knows what's going to happen. So, yeah, I think we should at least explore, it feels like we should at least explore with the select board and the town administrator,
What is allowed?
and what would it take to get them to consider changing the bylaws to allow it long term, in case we revert back to the old laws.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And the point is, even in the old law, there was an opportunity to do some of this that we weren't taking advantage of. And
We'd like to be.
And I think there are different boards that have different thoughts on this, because some boards, like I know some of the, boards dealing with land plans and things like that, don't want to have to present it where the plan can be,
Right.
broadcast through a Google Meet.
Yeah.
But when we have, parents of young children, and frankly, if we're going to have a really bad budget season, and we're going to be talking about how we balance a budget, people might want to participate in that. I mean, if people start hearing about, the challenges, they might want to actually tune in and hear what cuts we're thinking about. And so,
But again, that's not really a question, even
Yeah.
if we revert back. It's more about our own participation, so.
yes, you're right. You're right. Just making clear that we're doing that. But yeah, I think it can be challenging. The only, yeah. I mean, we were able to do this. Did we do this when we were at the high school as well? Were we on a Google Meet there too? I think we were.
Yeah, that's
So-
when I was,
Yep.
that's when I
That's what
had.
she
Yeah,
to
said.
go.
okay.
So we've been able to go remote, and I think we continue. We've always had, when certain other locations, we're not able to go live, like tonight. But we are going live here. So it's a nice balance to that.
Yeah.
I think the NORCAM video is, in a lot of ways, superior, but this is still
Yep.
giving people contact. What you can't do, obviously, when you're watching on television, is you can't
You can't
speak.
participate.
Correct.
Whereas this way you can, so.
Correct. Okay, so, yeah, so I think with the laws, with that expiring pretty soon, I think it's important to really think about what we do. And then The last one was just about, it was my goal about working with CPAC on their goals and initiatives, and I did participate in a planning meeting with Kathy Buston and Jen McGee, who are the two people leading it. Came up with some ideas, and I know that they're going to be speaking with Mrs. Conant soon about some of them, and yeah, I thought it was a good discussion. So I had reached out to them in the past and said, this is one of my goals this year, can let me know how I can help, and so they invited me to the planning meeting, which I haven't been a part of in the past, and so just showing them that we are trying to show them that we support them, and so that was good. Dr. Daly.
And I'll just share, based on some feedback from that meeting, I've discussed with the administration about, looking at every event we do through that sort of UDL inclusive lens of, we sort of design it. If you don't quite fit in that box, how can we proactively try to have some sensory friendly, start early for certain, and sometimes like we discussed, I think we always do it when asked. It's that idea that when we talk about belonging, it's that idea of, hey, he thought to ask whether there were any deaf, hard of hearing parents, or if they're, so trying to do that. I think the principals do a nice job of that, but I think there's always opportunity for growth. So we talked about that.
Yeah, that was one of the big takeaways, because I think there was, I think there's a lot of desire to do a lot of things, and one of my points was sometimes modifying the things that are already being done to make sure that everybody can be included might be better than doing an alternative event. Mm-hmm. And so I'll give you an example, which has apparently already been being done by the PTO at the little school for a while, but they had a glow party the other day. But for a half hour before, they had it just for sensory, kids with sensory issues.
Yeah, we do it at the batch.
Yes, and so I think that's a nice way to do it. But even when there's I gave a thought, like my oldest is going to high school next year. He's on a pretty serious IEP. I didn't even know if I should go to the orientation, and I actually ended up not being able to make it, but part of that was like, I don't know how it's going to impact him. And I remember going to middle school thinking about, if I'm going to have a child being pulled out of classes, I don't know what he's going to be pulled out of. So even if some of those presentations could have maybe beforehand, how orientation for parents with kids on an IEP or a 504, to be able to do that and say, you're going to hear about power block, and they're going to pull out a power block, just even, orienting around that. So to kind of be in conjunction with it, so you're not doing a back to school night for kids on IEPs, but you're just doing, a half hour before, a half hour after. So, yeah.
I'll just say to that, certainly all of those things are discussed at the individual team meetings and presented. And
correct. Sure.
For some people, that's the only place they would want to discuss. They wouldn't want to publicly come out and say, I'm at this meeting, therefore my child is on it, right, because of the confidentiality. But there may be others that would appreciate that, and we can consider some of those as well.
So I think just to wrap up school committee goals, okay start, but we have some work to do, team. And so a little gentle nudge to put those meetings on the schedule.
And many of them are not going to be finite this year anyway, but
correct.
We just want to be able to make progress.
Yeah, just making sure we're having those discussions and beginning them, and
All good.
Okay. Now, Dr. Daly, in contrast to us, is on top of everything, so I will turn it over to Dr. Daly to update us on his goals.
Sure, and part of what, as we try to create this synergy between NRHS 2025 and all of our goals, you're going to see a lot of overlap. I'm not going to go into great detail because I think I updated on the goals, but essentially, my first goal is around really looking at the school improvement plans at each building, updating them, changing them, and trying to align them with the district plan. And so that's gone very well. I meet with the principals once a month, and each month we sort of look at their goals, their individual goals, and their school goals, and we have a conversation around that and what updates and what areas are needed. And so everyone is on a great pace, and I'm excited to share that. And then I've encouraged them to share and make those connections at their school presentations about their school improvement plans. So instead of having sort of a mid-year school improvement plan update, I think embedding that in the presentations they're giving you makes a lot of sense. It may not be every single element of their school improvement plan, but I think a lot of them do. We have been spending a lot of time looking at the administrative evaluation rubric, which is new. There's a lot that's different with this rubric, and this is sort of the precursor for a change to the teacher rubric as well, which would be in the future. There's been some webinars. I went to one just last Thursday about how to use the administrative rubric around family engagement. And so we really did an unpacking of the document at a leadership team meeting, looking at how it's different. What's, not to bore you too much with the details, but the existing rubric has standards, 4 standards, and then it's got indicators and it has elements. The newer rubric has moved some of the elements into the indicators, so it's more of a focus at the indicator level. It's combined a few things, but then what it does is it really pulls proficient out, even physically. The current rubric is 4 boxes. This new one is proficient is big box, and then it's 3 boxes underneath, and it basically explains a little bit more of what for needs improvement is missing from proficient and what for exemplary could be added to make it exemplary. And I think it's a, one thing is the existing rubric has worked well for 10 years. We're kind of ready for something new. The second part is I do think it challenges us to go a little bit deeper, and it does introduce some new ideas around social emotional learning, diversity, equity, inclusion, all those pieces coming from the state that it's encouraging administrators to do differently. And so looking at data even, just, and it frames it in a different way that I think can drive some action. So I think there's a lot of positives, and we've been going through that. But part of our discussion at this month's visits is really, what did you get from the document? What questions do you have? So we're really just unpacking it as a team. Next goal is around NRPS 2025 and all of that, which I updated you on at our last meeting. And the next goal is around NTSS, and I can also provide an update here, but like I said earlier tonight, I think a lot of this is going to be shared in each building. The big piece that we're looking at right now of this process is scheduling. So the elementary level is implementing a lot more right now, and they were doing something similar already. Middle school has increased what they've done frequency-wise. They've changed their schedule this year, and they've increased the frequency. High school is really starting to look at what this looks like at the high school level and what the possible impacts could be to a schedule. Any school that is looking to do some kind of intervention or something to do something different, they spend years in a committee and they come away with a great idea to create something like Power Block. We already have Power Block. So our question is really, how can we use this even more efficiently to try to get at some of these needs for students? And part of what we're exploring with the high school is that very question. We're using it this way. How does it benefit all students? And I think the biggest difference, from my point of view, might be using the data to drive what students are doing during Power Block. I think now there's a lot of opportunity for students, teachers or students, to make decisions. But I think to really say, let's look at data to drive where you go and what you do and how you spend that time. So there's a lot of conversations at that level to be used. A lot of the focus has been on the academic parts of this, but there are also aspects of MTSS that get into behavioral expectations as well as social emotional as well as academic. So that's what's out there ahead. So just as a reminder, I'm now on a 2-year plan, so this is sort of, I'm checking in with you, but I'm not, there's no evaluation piece at this stage. I'm just giving you sort of this is more of a quarterly update, and then this summer would be the formative for year 1 of 2. And I will meet with, is it Jeff, who's evaluation subcommittee? So we'll meet.
I am not out of evaluation. Are you evaluation?
Am I?
You guys
Oh,
are-
I am.
you-
Oh, that is the other one I'm on.
So we will,
Oh.
so we will meet
How did I
more,
all these?
yeah, we'll have more of that process for
Were you
next
there
year.
the day we chose? Because that might have been it.
No, I wasn't there.
Yeah,
But no, that's fine.
in the previous years, this was sort of the time there was an actual written piece to it, but right now this is just an update, and then we would do that piece in the summer. Any questions?
And I appreciate, and to some extent, we should pay attention, because as you say, a lot of this stuff is coming through the information we're seeing meeting to meeting to meeting.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I've tried to draw attention. I know that Mr. Bernard did a little bit more to actually like call it out. I can try to do
on
that a little
the
bit.
agenda items, yeah,
yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah, I might try to introduce that. And just a reminder too, it was unfortunately, this didn't have the hyperlink, but I did.
I know, I was gonna ask about that. 'Cause
Yeah,
I kept clicking on it.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
when it got scanned, it wasn't there.
Yeah, I did find it on.
But it's on the district website, under superintendent, you can see my goals, you can see all the evidence,
Yeah.
everything is there as well.
Because I thought I had
Yeah,
a bookmark too, but it was,
Yeah, my original draft had it, but then it got photocopied and it doesn't copy it.
Well, I don't think, as you said, we're not evaluating it, but I have no comments. I think it looks like you're on target, and I appreciate the hard work. Any other comments or?
Same, and, seeing things happen. Again, parent perspective always makes sense, but very pleased.
Thank you.
Good job. Okay, moving on. We have minutes. So, what's the lead us in minutes?
Secretary?
Yeah, does Diana usually lead
Diana
the minutes?
usually does
So
it.
she's not here. Somebody else know.
I can do that. I move that the committee vote to approve the open session minutes from our January 23rd, 2023 meeting as written.
Second?
We have a motion by Rich and a second by Noel. Beat ya. And then, any comment, discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 4-0.
That's it for minutes.
Thank you. No budget update today?
There's none other than what we've discussed a little bit, maybe we'll discuss more later.
Yeah, that's finance planning team, I think we can talk about that. And then, no staffing,
None at this time.
bids and donations.
So we have one or two here. I move that the school committee vote to accept with gratitude a donation of $10,000 from North Reading Youth Football, to help support the cost of the new stadium scoreboard at the high school.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion by Rich and a second by Noel. Any discussion? I think the new scoreboard was installed, I saw.
It is
So-
installed, it's done there, it looks beautiful. And thank you so much to everyone that was involved. I know there's some work to do with some signage, and thanks for that as well.
Yeah, yep, looks great. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 4-0.
Oh, that was it.
That was it.
That's it. And then grants, I think you said we do have one.
Yeah, I just wanted to share with the committee that we have once again applied for the cybersecurity grant from the state. So that was awarded. There is a letter here from the governor, lieutenant governor, about this grant that I'm going to just share with you. And then there's a press release from Representative Jones' office, as well as Senator Tarr's office, and it has some feedback that I provided. We still consider this a huge priority, something we're working on. I'm also sensing from my staff a lot of fatigue around similar exercises, so I'm hoping to be able to work with this program to have the phishing exercises for all, certainly all of our new hires involved in the process moving forward, and to have some modified expectations for the current staff, maybe to switch to biannual, similar to what we do with the ethics training, and/or really try to find something that's very education focused. I think this has been great. I think I've shared the rates. I think we've done well, but I also think there is it's taxing on people's time to do this much of a program, and I want it to be. I want to get the bang for the buck.
How much time does it take in individuals?
Yeah, I would say at least 4 to 5 hours.
Total.
Yeah, and so it's finding the time, missing other safety initiatives or school time, and so we've done well to get it there. We've required one module, which is about an hour, and then we've given folks the option. And a good number of people have done it. I know we discussed last time we want everyone to do it, which I understand. But I think maybe there's a way to find something that everyone needs to do that's very school focused.
Yeah. In my work, I have some very simple videos I'm supposed to watch, like 5-minute, like this is what fishing is.
But we do an hour every year.
Yeah, we do an hour, yeah, and it's an interesting, it actually can be interesting.
Yeah.
But
It's fascinating. I personally have used it in my whole life, and I say this every time I talk about it. I want the students to have something, and I want
Yes.
parents. I want my parents to do what I did because it's so important. You know, we get these in. And I will say we have them happening. Yeah, the first one came in that actually had my email address involved. Usually, it's like if you look under it, it's got like some crazy, right? But this was an email saying from me to accounts payable. It was very believable. It was like, hey, you know what? Just go ahead and pay this account. Now, what this Fisher scammer doesn't know is that in this district, my office is right next to her, and she'd be offended if I didn't just come out and say it to her, and then I sent her an email. But I think in a larger district, it's very easy to get fooled by these things. So I think it's
Any
important to always
organization.
review it.
Yeah.
You know? But I think our staff is very aware, and they come up to us and talk about it all the time.
the program that we have has the former hacker who runs the company actually walks you through how a hacker steals your information.
Yeah.
You can see him on the actual hacking computer, hacking into an account that he's set up. It's really scary, but also fascinating.
Yeah, I did one. It's funny because I do all these. I teach an adjunct class right now. Then I do it for that school, or if I do it, right, so I've done them all. But that does also give me the lens of, I kind of like this piece of this one or this piece. So I'm always giving feedback to the state to say, like, can we narrow this down? Because they're doing it for all municipal agencies, and it would be great to have one that's really K-12 focused. So it's always a process, but we are very pleased to have been selected.
That's great.
What's the dollar amount of the grant?
It's not quite specified that way. I think they can give you a number. I don't know that they give you a number.
Okay.
It's basically, it's free to us. But
Okay.
if not,
The program is paid for you.
so they're basically
That's what
giving
it is.
us something for free that
Okay.
if we were to go purchase it.
Okay.
And so that doesn't really fall under something we need to approve because there's no budgetary, there's no money coming in and then going out.
Most likely, yeah, I would say that's true. I figured it is technically a grant, so I present everything.
Yep. So do we want to make an approval on that or not?
It's not on the agenda for approval, so I would say no, and again,
So-
it's not a dollar.
Yeah, I thought we
coming in.
had said it was more informational rather than approval.
But also remember the grants specifically aren't on the published agenda. It just says grants.
Yeah, it is on the.
And it's on the agenda for grants.
Okay.
It's not in the.
Because if you look, this is what's published, it just said say grants, it wouldn't have the
Right.
specific bids or donations. It wasn't in our packet,
Yeah,
but
okay.
that's not, the published one is just a
Because
one pager.
Last time you did have
Yeah.
one or two
Yeah.
actual,
Exactly. Best practice would be, would have been in your
Yeah.
packet. This is a late edition because this just came
I
out.
see. Right.
So
Which is fine.
I think technically, because it's on the agenda, you could approve it.
We could approve it if we
Well,
wanted
We can
to.
do it either way. I can put it on next time, whatever we want.
then I'm okay with it if we did now, I'm just not sure that, you know what, I move that we approve this grant, the cybersecurity grant.
There we go.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Rich, a second by Noel. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes 4-0. There we go.
Easier than going
Well done.
waffling.
Okay, perfect.
I don't know, what do you think? I don't know.
Okay.
That's just-
Subcommittee updates. Finance planning team met on February 17th. You want to throw the hammer or do you want me to throw the hammer?
Well, I will say this, and you're good at dropping the hammer. I will say this. The numbers that we have from the town do not look horrible. That being said, there's a couple of pieces that we're waiting for final information on that might make it slightly less horrible, but I think it's going to be a tough thing to bridge from where we are to where we want to be.
And I'll just kind of start kind of broad first. So remember when the money comes in, money comes into a big bucket. Some expenses come off the top. Then the money that's left gets split between the municipal and the school side. So the challenge is the money coming into the big bucket isn't as much year over year as usual because
So it's a revenue problem.
it's a both problem, but so the money coming in is not as much because, for example, new revenue from the Pulte project. Pulte project's been put on hold. Some of the, they're behind where they were supposed to be. Building permits, construction permits are slower than they've been. Some other revenue sources are slower than they've been. And so because of that, we don't want to anticipate revenue that won't come in. So the revenue projections are a little bit lighter. Now again, they're more than they were the year before, but not as much as normal. On top of that, there are some expenses off the top that are much higher than last year. The original projection, I don't know if we can say it or not, but I'm going to say it. I mean, the original projection on health insurance was a 16% increase.
Right.
Now, we have resources in North Reading, like a PFA, where we've put money aside that could be used to buy down what that increase is. But even if we do that, remember, it's still an increase where we'd use it to help year over year. But last year it went up 10%, and if this year goes up 16%, but that's a huge number off the top. So the bottom line is the money passing on to the school is actually less than last year. Not even talking about not as big of a percentage increase. Usually we need a 3 to 3.5% increase essentially.
And our starting point's even lower than last year.
Correct. Right now.
Before the increase.
Hopefully it'll get up a little bit, but essentially from the modified services budget that you haven't seen yet, it'll be about a $2 million gap at this point, which is far more than normal. And so, and then our own expenses are higher than expected as well because Dr. Daly's talked about the out-of-district placements, that it might be 14% when normally it's a 2 to 2.5% increase. It might be 14%. So,
Any update on that?
yeah.
Seems to be finalized at 14.
Oh,
Yeah,
geez.
we were
Wow,
hoping for
that's
some
surprising.
kind of compromise, but that seems to be solid.
And
So Michael
even,
has
yeah.
adjusted the budget now to reflect.
And even things with circuit breaker that help that are a year behind. So even if it gets adjusted, some of that gets adjusted out of circuit breaker, that's a year behind, so it doesn't help us for this year. So the bottom line is, I'll just say right now, I don't know how we get to a balance. I don't know how we get to level services. I don't know how we don't have cuts. Just from, I don't know where that is, but I just don't know how we don't have cuts this year.
That jump that you just talked about, the 14%, is that, talk a little bit about that process.
The OSD sets the cost increase for private school tuition based on data of what it costs to operate those institutions. And they make a recommendation, and that recommendation goes through a process, and it's, I believe it was just finalized, but we did reach out and inquire to see whether there was any motion. There was the superintendents, school committees, teachers union, and both AFT and MTA, I believe, all four of them wrote a joint letter asking for consideration, and my understanding is that it was finalized without reaching us.
And just to say that another way, so all of our out-district placements, those costs are proscribed by the state, by this group setting the rates.
But they can change and increase their rates to that amount.
Right.
So, another benefit, obviously, of using collaboratives in private school. But for some students, the only option is the private placement, and that's the increase.
And I think you had said 14% for us, based on the current placements, would be about $350,000.
It's around
That's just one line item in the budget, $350,000 more. So,
And then there's been a few individual move-ins costs too that have kind of changed our frequency. So our level services number has certainly increased.
It's like a 1%, just on the whole budget, just that number.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's definitely a concern everywhere, not just North Reading, obviously, but so that's a conversation.
The health insurance will hopefully, we have the PFA and there'll be some discussion on how to get that down. So I don't anticipate that the revenue will actually be less than the year before, but I don't think it'll be close to 3% higher. And that's a challenge. And so if the off the top expenses are higher, and our individual expenses are higher,
Right.
and the revenue increase is lower, even if there's a revenue increase, but the revenue increase is lower, the combination of that is a really bad year.
Yeah.
So, yes.
We intend to still bring forward a budget that has 3 columns, similar
Yep.
to what we've done in the past, level services, modified NRPS 2025, and then full NRPS 2025, which would have everything we intend to do. I agree there could be cuts. We're still going to present and hope to move forward, and then.
Well, I'm not even talking, I'm not necessarily, just to be clear, I'm not saying there's cuts of personnel or whatever, I'm just saying there's cuts to the budget that we're proposing. I don't know if there's any way that the budget that we're putting out there is going to be able to be passed. I mean, last year we were able to pass the modified level services budget and actually add 1 position or whatever. I'm just saying, just to be transparent, I just don't see that happening. There's a lot of work to be done to figure out what we can get for revenue, what can, be funded other ways, and then figuring out how we still balance from that. I'm not trying to get out in front of the cart before Dr. Jelly yells at me later on, but I'm just saying, I think the budget itself, which has staff and other non-staff in there, is going to need cut somehow. So
I will say that Michael spent a great amount of time between that meeting and Friday morning adjusting to try to get to a slightly more palatable number. And some of those cuts are already painful. Some of those things we did, not replacing this right away. Now, I don't see them as sustainable long term, but a retirement here, things like the kindergarten discussion, all of this, and we said, we can't bring that forward and come in with this number, so we've already tried to make some pieces, so that'll all be shared in great detail. He's got the budget books, I'm sure you can see this and this.
Well, and the only other thing I'll say is we have a select board meeting going on down where we normally meet, and part of that is talking about, sewer, which the hope is to, add revenue into the plan. And I think it's an important discussion to have, and I think we need to also make sure that we're educating, when these things are happening, I think we need to educate the public on the challenges we're facing sometimes, because nobody is in the meeting right now. And I think we need to tell people sometimes, because
There's a connection.
when we come to town meeting, it's great to come to town meeting with a balanced budget and to stand up there and spend 1 minute on a budget warrant article and pass it. But what people need to see is what got cut from that budget and what wasn't there and how hard it was. And I mean, at the end of the day, the town needs to vote. I mean, the people of North Reading will vote on, do you want these cuts? Do you want an override? What do you want? I mean, because, when we have good revenue increases and we can manage level services and add a position we need here or there, everything's fine. But when we get to the side where, we're in a recession and there's challenges, I think we need to hear from the public sometimes on what they want us to do. So.
Yeah, I think it would be unfortunate to go through this process with, and it may well happen, but with nobody in the public sort of watching and commenting and offering, and parents especially.
Yep. And this is the precursor. We'll have actual numbers, so
Yep.
before Neil emails me, we don't have the numbers yet, Neil, but we will, I promise you. We'll get you all the information, and so it's just looking at where we're going, and it's just a tough,
You're setting expectations.
it's going to be a tough year. It's going to be a very tough year. So.
All around.
Yeah, tons of.
Okay. Yeah, and again, this is not just a school issue. This is a municipal side too. They have less money than after the cut as well than they had last year. So.
And if I could
Yeah,
just
go ahead.
circle back to what you said earlier, we do have the fortune this year of we allocated our ESSER fund to be spread out over 3 years, or else we'd be facing an even greater level of
Right.
services and balance. Positions like technicians and nurses and
Yep.
Yeah, yours and Michael's recommendations on that 3 or 4 years ago, 3 years ago, were spot on, and it's worked out really well.
Okay. Athletics subcommittee update.
I missed the athletics subcommittee meeting, so.
Diana's also there. She's not here.
Yeah,
Dale.
I believe we've already There
Yeah,
was
there
no
hasn't been
meeting in
one
between
since.
meetings. These
Okay.
are just upcoming meetings.
Oh, this is just the upcoming, oh, these are March 8th, okay. So this is upcoming.
So we didn't miss anything.
Okay. And then, oh, sorry, I didn't even notice that, so it's another section. So upcoming finance planning team meeting is February 17th at 8:15 a.m. Athletic subcommittee is March 8th at noon. Fine arts subcommittee is March 8th at 3:15. Dr. Daly, administrative report.
Yeah, I would just share with the date, we may revisit the date of the athletic subcommittee. I think that some members might have difficulty, but
Okay.
those are upcoming. And we will schedule some policy subcommittee, so I'll be reaching out to those folks as
Okay.
well. Because as discussed tonight, we have some things to talk about,
Yeah.
plus some other items from research.
Yes.
Administrative report, I shared with you in your packet a few updates. I did speak to Family University. So that has been, we did send out a save the date last week, and we've collected, like I mentioned earlier, about 17 or so already interested. We're hoping to get a lot of people excited about Dr. Englander. I think her focus, it's certainly beneficial to all, but it'll certainly be beneficial for the younger group. She just wrote a book about you have a cell phone, now what? And it's sort of for that young upper elementary, middle school student about bullying and cyberbullying related to that. She's an expert in cyberbullying. And she's presented with us in the past, but it's been about 10 years, and so we're excited to bring her back. She
Things have
was
changed
very well
dramatically
received.
in 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, as I mentioned before, we would have Universal Design for Learning, MTSS, Multi-Tiered System of Supports, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging, Drug and Alcohol Awareness in partnership with North Reading Substance Abuse Coalition. We'll have some information tables. Officer Lucci, Ms. Lukowitz will be there, and we met with them today. So we're very excited about some of the opportunities and offerings that are coming. The Charles Jones Excellence Education Award, we had a ceremony on Friday. I was able to join remotely this year. Mr. Kleen did a great job as the MC of the event. We honored Mr. Jonathan Hudson, who we all met at our last meeting. He was very very deserving, as I think we've all seen, and a lot of his students and family were there to celebrate. But the full list of nominees, as I said at the ceremony, and I told the committee, you could close your eyes and throw a dart, and we are very, very proud and honored to have all those nominees, and just some wonderful ideas and thoughts shared by the parents and students who made the nominations. Claudia Brown does a great job of collecting that information, put it in a nice folder, and so everyone gets sort of a packet of being able to read some of the nice things that are said about you. And it really, I say this all the time, it's just a great opportunity, sort of in the the cold winter days, to have this really nice, warm, and I've been an educator for a long time, and there are tough days, and then it only takes one positive kid to reach out and say you made a difference, and you kind of recharge your battery get you through at least the rest of the year. So no, but it's always wonderful, and we want to thank all those nominees. So I did share that out with the community as well. And then just an update, we had that presentation on substance abuse, the North Reading High School Parents Association, and the police presented. It was very, very informative. We had several school department members there as well. It was a good mix of parents in the crowd, and I'll say that I felt that it was some faces that I wasn't that familiar with. Sometimes you have the sense you're always preaching to the choir. It's the same, it's basically the Substance Abuse Coalition members who were there. I felt like it was some new faces, which was great. A lot of great questions about some scary topics that I think is important for everyone to know. So I think we can do this presentation again. We're going to have some, I think they were calling it like Pot 2.0 or something like they have a catchy, but things are different than they used to be. So it's important to share that out. So we will have them at Family University as well.
Excellent. I do. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, the list of nominees for the Charles Jones Award is phenomenal. The fact that it's just such a big list, if nothing else. And I can't imagine a teacher more deserving than Mr. Hudson for what we saw and what we saw when we went to the bocce tournament on the 28th. It was really awesome.
I was going to call out that. I mean, I maybe nudged everybody on the goals, but I thought it was very nice. I think Noelle, you went there later after,
I went
right?
for the
The
last
bocce
hour.
tournament, yeah. But I mean, so all 4 of us made it to that one, and all 4 of us made it to Into the Woods as well, which I'll call it as
Well, I
well,
mean,
which
all
was
3.
really good. So, yeah, so Noah and I were at all 3 of them, but it was, no, it was good. I mean, it's just nice to be part of the school, and I think
No,
it's nice.
absolutely.
Yeah.
It was great for me to, to see the bocce tournament. It's again, a new role for me to be school committee and to be able to go to some of the sporting events like that is
Yeah.
great.
My daughter loved it.
Yeah.
I mean,
It was nice.
it's great.
It was, yeah, it was just nice to see. Again, I think it's good when the school committee gets involved in the school and sees
Yeah.
what's going on.
I
And,
mistakenly sat in the Natick section, but
It was
And
great
she
to see
wasn't
all of you
invited
there.
back.
And the,
yeah. My
the play,
husband's from
the
Natick.
play was phenomenal
Play was
tonight.
great.
I've been saying, like, I can't tell, was it the costumes, was it the acting, was it
It was the
sets?
dancing.
There was the dancing, there was just so many elements, and I think as,
It was the Buckleys, so obviously.
Ms. Piper
That's
said
fine.
earlier, we're gonna see another, I mean, the students that did all the fitness for the fall with Pippin.
yeah,
Oh,
the acrobats.
They're all training
Now
to
they're
be,
boxing.
they're training to be boxing. It's unbelievable,
Amazing.
what we're gonna see, coming out of
Yeah.
there. So we're really excited.
Are we
about
hosting a competition
it. We are,
this year?
so March 4th, yeah. So it's all, so that we're hosting Drama Fest, and within Drama Fest is when they're doing their one act. So,
Let's to see if she needs volunteers. Do that.
Okay.
That's great.
Well,
It definitely brings I think brings the school together too.
Super Bowl win, Notorious,
Mhm.
great programs. I mean,
yeah,
it's a great list.
yeah, it's great.
it is.
And and it's also an inclusive list. That's the other thing I like about, like, when I go to performances and seeing, kids that might, not normally be, like that's the social aspect for certain kids, and
Yeah.
I think that's nice that they're able to, they really include whoever wants to be part of the
Yeah.
groups, and so
Yep.
I think that's a really important piece of that, and, yeah. Okay,
Awesome.
no correspondence other than
None
emails
of
we've
this stuff.
received. And then future business, February 27th, 6:30 PM, digital learning update.
Mhm.
March 13th, we were at the Hood School, or March 27th, which one are we? It says both of them are the Hood.
I'm sorry, it's the 13th.
The 13th, we're at the Hood, and then the 27th, do you know where we are?
I can double check.
Going to another school? Well, we have
I
two
don't
meetings
believe
before
so,
that.
yeah, I'm sorry about
Okay.
that. typo, yeah.
No, that's fine, so March
So our next
13th.
meeting is the 20, is the.
February 27th, we will be
Distance.
in the
learning.
DLL,
Okay.
unless we get kicked out again. But I don't actually mind this location, honestly.
This is cozy.
Yeah.
This
That's
is
kinda-
where, this is,
Cool.
Cheryl doesn't feel good for
We
5
used
if
to
we
be
do
in the
Yeah,
middle
well,
school.
that's true, but it's kind of a, nice surrounded by books is a good thing.
Oh, we could take those chairs. They don't
Right.
necessarily.
Switch the pairs out. We told you you got the room, not the chairs.
Exactly.
the 27th is the middle school presentation and we're in the distance learning.
Okay, great. Excellent. Well, if there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
Second?
We have a motion by Rich, a second by Noel. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes 4-0. Thank you, everyone.